Hey guys, welcome back to my video. For this week, I actually won't be making a cake. I'll be taking a little break from dessert for now, but I will be jumping back into the whole wedding centerpiece terrarium project that I was working on previously. If you haven't seen that video, please check it out. It's kind of like this mushroom fairy terrarium mason jar look that I've been going for. So I'm continuing on with that theme, and I'm going to be making, I believe, 12 pieces in total. So my wedding party is coming up in about 2.5 months. So for me, that's crunch time. I want to start working on these and banging them out because I really don't want to be rushing on something that a bunch of people are going to see. For the pieces, instead of like the mushroom theme, I'm actually going to be doing more of a pop culture route. So I do love a good pop culture reference. I'm a fan of a lot of little things, and I kind of wanted to showcase that. That would be my touch in terms of having this party and sticking with a theme. I'm not so much of a big flowery bouquet type of person, although I do think they're really beautiful. I just don't think that's my personality. So you're going to see exactly what my interests are in terms of movies, comics, TV, and so on, and I think it's just going to be really fun. So the first step was actually making the characters in Sculpey so that I could easily bake and paint them. But before we get into that, let's talk about the characters I'm doing. So we have Wicket from Star Wars Return of the Jedi, Grogu from Mandalorian, the Niffler from Fantastic Beasts, Kodama, or the Forest Spirits from Princess Mononoke, Totoro from My Neighbor Totoro, Stitch from Lilo and Stitch, Baby Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy, Gary from Spongebob SquarePants, Bulbasaur from Pokemon, Bag End Hobbit Hole from Lord of the Rings, Enoch from Over the Garden Wall, Jason Funderburger, the frog version from Over the Garden Wall. So here is the Wicket that I had first done. His arm is like that because he's getting a spear. And then I went on to the Niffler, which will actually be an extra character. I wasn't really happy with how he turned out, but if I need an extra centerpiece, he'll be the one to use. I also did a Stitch. This was probably the one I was most nervous about getting right, just because he has such clean, round lines. But I was actually really happy with how he looked. I'll only be showing a couple of figures, just because I'm sculpting 12, I'll show them here and there. I definitely had issues with this one, Grogu, because of all the wrinkles he has. He kind of came out like a grandpa, which wasn't the look I was going for, but it's kind of hard to make something that's so young and cute, but also have a ton of wrinkles, not look a little strange. But I made sure to make him from that iconic scene where he's sipping that broth all cute in the morning. The Hobbit Hole was also a surprise to me. It was super fun to make. I was a little nervous about it because it was a structure and not a character, but adding all the little details was super satisfying, and I thought maybe I should do like a whole little like bag end display, or just maybe even like part of the Shire eventually. This is Jason Funderburker, or the frog from Over the Garden Wall. I have to say he became one of my favorites. Now I had to make the tree for the Princess Mononoke Kodama figures. It looks a little questionable when I first started out, but I made him in parts just because it was probably the bulkiest of the sculpts, and I didn't want to create the whole thing and then paint it later. I thought I'd paint it in parts to make it much easier. This was actually a couple days later, or maybe even weeks later. I had decided to do an Enoch because I didn't think I had enough centerpieces, which is funny to think about now because I'm leaving the Niffler out in case of emergency only. I had to make bases for a few of my characters just because I didn't want them to be sitting straight on the glass. And I thought it'd be good to have something like a different element than just like moss there to kind of give it more of its characteristic look. So for Enoch, I made like wood floorboards. It was then time for me to actually bake off all of the characters, and they were in at I think 325 for 15 minutes. These are now all of the baked off versions of everything I've sculpted. Next up is actually painting them. Again, I won't show painting all the characters because then this would be like a 3-hour long video, but just wanted to show what my process kind of looked like. I was definitely winging it, but I actually was pretty happy with how they all turned out. Another step I took was actually gluing some of the characters to the bases. I had painted them separately just so it was easy for me to handle, and thought after painting I could then glue it all together to give it a more seamless look. I went out and finally bought all the jars that I needed. So we have like a fishbowl version, a cookie jar version, as well as a cloche version. I just put the characters in here for now so I can get kind of a good idea of how it's going to turn out. Some of these, like this little hobbit hole you'll see, needs to be lifted a bit. When it lays down right on the bowl glass, it's just a little too low. So I like kind of like the proportions of how it looks on a little hill. I am sitting on the floor of my office / workroom, but I wanted to show the materials I'd be working with. So these are the cloches again, and then also I got these fairy lights. I got a full pack of these off of Amazon. We also got some moss. I have more coming in the mail. It just hasn't arrived yet. It should be here this week. I also got these pretty fake, cheapy looking plants from IKEA. I didn't mind that they didn't look the best, only because I'd be cutting them up and putting them under the glass cloche or inside the jars, so I wasn't too worried about how realistic they would look. Here's another one I got. And then of course, these big wood slices that would act as the base for all of my centerpieces. So I would put the little figure in the middle, put some plants around it, also the fairy lights, and then put the cloche on top, put some more moss around the outside, and yeah, I thought it looked really cute. I laid everything out on the floor because I feel like I just have a better idea looking at everything all at once how I want it to go, because again, I am kind of winging it. I have a lot of Pinterest inspirations that I can look at, but really we're just working with what we have. So here we go. When I did the mushroom terrarium, it was great to do like a trial run because I realized there would be specific steps I have to take to make this work. And I think the very first step I have to do is to actually place the fairy lights within the jars. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually put in the lights for all the jars first, because that's the most pain in the ass step to take, and then I'll go on with the fun stuff. This actually turned out to be the most frustrating step of the entire process, definitely the most stressful. So what I did was actually fold the fairy lights in half so they kind of doubled up in the right places to make it look more full. I had secured the wire to the glass with little bits of tape, while I'd go in afterwards with a hot glue gun that would look like less intrusive than pieces of tape on the glass. But then I realized once I started to take off the tape, the whole thing came crashing down. Like, the hot glue gun glue will not stick to glass. So that's a hot tip for anybody who crafts with hot glue or maybe everybody knows this and it's just me, but it will not stick to glass. Okay, I gotta record this quick because the gardeners are outside and they've been outside all day with their leaf blowers. They are very thorough, but yesterday was a super fail with getting the fairy lights in the jar, but I actually got a jar of this museum wax that people use to stick to glass, so hopefully this works much better. Today I'm hoping to
Five minutes later.
So I'm hoping to get all the jars lighted up today. The museum wax wasn't actually what I had in mind. It was a lot gooier and stickier than I had thought. You're supposed to mold them into these little balls to then adhere to the glass that you're working with. And it did, I mean, it stuck, but it was kind of a messy process and it took a lot longer than I thought. However, at this point when I had started lighting up the jars, it led to a really pretty effect, so I didn't have too much issue with them at this time. The very first jar I decided to work on was Bulbasaur. I started off by elevating him because he kind of sat a little low to the ground when I had the cloche over him. When I did put the cloche over him, I realized that the museum wax, this ball right here, was kind of obstructing the view. It really takes away from the point that the lights are supposed to be fairy-like rather than stuck on. In any case, I soldiered through. I was kind of excited to just like see it all put together so I knew what steps I had to take, if that makes any sense. So here I am attaching all the little fake plants I had cut up prior. These are those potted plants from IKEA, as well as extra moss. And then now to put on the jar. And you can see that I am struggling hard. The lights kept coming off. It kept leaving these greasy smudges all over, and you'll see them later on too. And then cut to this. I had decided to scrap the whole folded wire museum wax altogether. I unraveled the whole thing and decided instead of putting all the lights in the jar, I will put half of them inside and half of them outside. And it actually turned out really good. It's not what I had intended to do in the beginning, but once the light turned on, it really led to that fairy effect, and I was really happy with it. I have to say that Jason Funderburger was probably one of my favorite terrariums. Next up is the Totoro version. I just kind of wanted to show what I did with the different shapes that I had. You can see that Totoro is actually laying on top of a base, which is on top of another base, and that's actually the very lowest base is made out of moldable foam clay, and that's because I wanted to elevate him. I wasn't too worried about color matching because I knew I'd be covering it in moss. You can see that I decided to secure the jars to the base. I'm also securing the lids to any of the lidded jars that I have so everything's more secure. So I was able to use the material anyway, and I was pretty happy about that. Here is Gary from Spongebob. I don't know if you can really tell. I really tried to pick like the brighter greenery and details that I had on hand. Like a very fluorescent, almost highlighter green moss, some extra flowers, just because he's like an under the water scene. SpongeBob is a very bright and colorful show. Maybe in the end it's not too noticeable how different he is, but I still am really happy how he turned out. So wrapping up, I had to vacuum all the little bits of twigs and branches and moss that had gone everywhere. Really, when you're in the mode, the last thing you're thinking about is the mess that you're making, and boy was it a mess. And here are all the completed centerpieces, showing you the lights off version and then the lights on. Each of the jars were, like the jar themselves, were about $7. Then factoring the cost of like the plants and the moss, the wood slice, which was probably a little bit more. So maybe like 20 to 25 bucks total. I did get a lot of the items and materials on sale, so that really helped out a bunch. I would think that this is like a budget project to do. I was trying to save money, but more than that, I was trying to just put my own touch on the types of centerpieces that I would want for my own personal event. If I had more money to spend, I totally would, but I kind of want to save that for the honeymoon, to be honest. Okay. Well, that's the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. I think my next project might be another cake, but needless to say, I had so much fun doing these. Despite feeling really relieved that they're actually done now, I had a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it too. So I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.